can't believe it. I never seen it. I ain't never seen a frog like that. Every time I try to go with the boing, boing, boing. Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the C.M. Kozeman special on one of the rarest, most little known cryptid creatures ever. This thing is so rare. I basically did a sort of first step research. I basically wrestled this thing out of its original source material. So you're seeing it for the first time on YouTube at least. Behold, the Pennsylvania Frog Lord, the strangest frog cryptid ever that maybe never was, but we'll get there. Before beginning, let me give you a little introduction. Maybe you're new to this channel, so I am C.M. Kozeman. I am an eccentric author, artist, and researcher. I like weird things generally, and if you feel like supporting this channel, please consider visiting patreon.com or buy me a coffee or visit my merch store. The links are in the video description and in the pinned comment. And also, if you want to know more about what I do, try to follow me on these other social media platforms. Well, also a quick interjection here. I got this new fancy setup now, which allows me to speak at my normal voice. If you like my slow voice, just keep it this way. If you want to listen faster, just use that goddamn speed up icon and listen to me at 1.25 or 1.5 times speed. Makes me sound like a cooler person. Okay, let's go. Before beginning, if you're new to this channel, you will find lots of stuff about cryptids, Pennsylvanian folklore, and frogs in general. Go check out other parts of this channel. I'm just too lazy to give links, but go check out other parts for a 2-part special on every frog cryptid explained. Well, every frog cryptid until this one. And then there's an earlier big podcast about cryptids, monsters, and supernatural phenomena from North Pennsylvanian folk tales. That was an amazing podcast. The sound quality is a bit off, but it's one of the most popular videos on this channel. Plus, if you like frogs, there's a 7-page C.M. Kozeman frog extravaganza just out there for you to watch. So, you know, I have a foundation on this sort of thing. So without much ado, let's go. In order to better understand the Frog Lord of Pennsylvania, first we need to acquaint ourselves with Loren Eiseley, a very famous at the time American nature writer and philosopher. I happened to come into one of his books in a second-hand bookshop in Ankara, Turkey, and I said, oh, this is interesting, I got it. Turns out the writing is a bit dense. I mean, sorry to say, this guy probably had the best intentions and he was obviously a very smart and educated and interesting individual, but the way he writes it, I guess we're about to see it anyways, the way he writes is very, very dense, repetitive, and OTOs. Plus, the book was alright, I guess. It's a compilation of his memoirs and his ideas about nature, some essays. This is the book in question, by the way, the Star Thrower. It's a big compilation of many of his writings, almost a sort of a memoir. And this is where we encounter the Frog Lord of Pennsylvania. He also has a lot of other books. One of the better ones is The Unexpected Universe. Go look him up, but be warned. And he does have this interesting penchant, let's say. At the end of the book, he lists all the honorary doctorates he received from universities and colleges around the world. He says, here are my honorary degrees: Western Reserve University, St. Lawrence College, Ursinus College, Lewis and Clark College, second and third tier universities. Now, why an author would need to flex this is beyond me. There's a list of all societies he's a member of. Once again, I don't understand. And if you read his writing, you also get a whiff of a slightly self-important person. This is one of his most famous writings. It's the thing where about once on ancient earth there was a human boy walking along a beach. So on this ancient earth there were also boys that were not human. I don't know. This is the kind of OTO's writing that I'm kind of pissed at. But anyways, there just had been a storm, and starfish had been scattered along the sands. The boy knew the fish would die, so he began to fling. And this is the very famous, almost meme-like thing. Somebody comes and asks, like, what are you doing? It's not going to do anything. It's not going to do any good. But he said, well, it mattered to this one. And he flung the starfish into the welcoming sea. Once again, this guy had the thing for adjectives. I mean, as an author, as a person who writes in the English language, let me just be politically correct, and let me just say this sort of writing just isn't my game. Anyways, let's move on away from Loren Eiseley's critique to The Dance of the Frogs, which is the name of one of the chapters, which appears in the Star Thrower book. Very interesting and cool story. We're actually gonna paraphrase it and read it together, so why don't you join me? So this is basically Loren Eiseley's personal experience with a very eccentric guy at a certain explorers club, which was a kind of like gentleman's society in Pennsylvania, I guess. Let's go. We're just gonna narrate now. In fact, I'm just gonna cue some atmospheric scary music. 2, 3, 1. Wow. Just take a look. You can't do anything with this fancy technology these days. Okay, let me take a sip of Cosman coffee. And let me remind you once again to support me on patreon.com, or if you like this show, just buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com. If you do that, you get many benefits. You get to see artwork drawn by me, painted by me, that nobody else has seen. Plus, you get to download the PDF versions of these talks, so you can go over them and show them to your friends and stuff. Anyways, let's go. He was a member of the Explorers Club, and he had never been outside the state of Pennsylvania. Some of us who were world travelers used to smile a little about that. And even though we knew his scientific reputation had been at one time great, it is always the way of youth to smile. Like, you see this like, this rambling, meandering way to write. It just reeks of self-importance. Anyways, back to the story. I used to think of myself as something of an adventurer, but at the time came when I realized that old Albert Dreer, huddling with his drink in the shadows close to the fire, had journeyed further than the country of into the country of terror that any of us would ever go. So this herpetologist, Albert Dreer, had apparently seen some shit. Interesting. He was a morose and aging man, without family and without intimates. Odd word choice there. His membership in the club dated back into the decades when he was a zoologist, famous for his remarkable experiments upon amphibians. He had recovered and actually produced the adult stage of the Mexican axolotl, as well as achieving remarkable tissue transplants in salamanders. The club had been flattered to have him then, travel or no travel, but the end was not fortunate. The brilliant scientist had become a misanthrope. The achievement all lay in the past, and Albert Dreyer kept to his solitary room, his solitary drink, his accustomed spot by the fire. Seems like something out of another age, huh? These clubs, these scientific clubs where you had a room to work in and stay. Seems like the furthest, wildest fantasy now, that nobody can even afford a room, let alone a house. It was a different time. Instead of Discord servers, people had actual rooms and clubs. What a more civilized, enlightened and easygoing era. Anyways, back to the mood, back to the story. By the way, since I want this to be more than just a reading of the story, the reading of this guy's account of this remarkable Pennsylvanian cryptid, let's take a little side tangent here and talk more about axolotls. You've probably seen these guys in pet shops. They look like this. They're these like chunky, embryonic, very innocent looking salamanders that almost look like fish. People keep them in a way similar to fish. They're aquarium animals, not terrarium animals. Now, did you know that actually if you inject these guys with inorganic iodine, they could metamorphose into their adult form? Because this thing is actually a sort of hyper extended tadpole form, and it can live and breed this way. But actually, if you give these guys some iodine injections, they actually turn into these squirmy Gumby boys. How interesting. Would be interesting if someone associated with this channel who knew how to pull off experiments like this, maybe Prometheum, an old-time contributor, could do some experiment like this, and like these things look wild. Amazing. Here's another one I just like siphoned off the internet. They basically turn into these like darkling sort of quote-unquote regular salamanders. And actually, if you go online, there are many posts on Reddit or wherever about people applying iodine to their salamanders, and they apparently turn into these things. But also be careful, because apparently too much iodine can kill them, and it's not very clear if you need to inject them or if you just administer them into their water. I don't know, it's strange. But this sort of thing has been done before. There are quite old scientific papers about iodine basically accelerating the metamorphosis of frog tadpoles. So this is nothing new under the sun. So already in this account, this Albert Dreer character, it's either a pseudonym or maybe the story is just more than just facts, because people have been producing the adult forms of axolotls for some time, and they look wonderful. Anyways, I had long been a student of the strange melange of superstition and woodland wisdom that makes up the religious life of the nature peoples. This is Loren Eiseley's way of referring to Native Americans. Once again, the guy's nativism bleeds into conceit. I don't think if I would ever call anybody nature peoples. But anyways. Moreover, I had come to know something of the strange familiarities of the shaking tent rite to the phenomena of the modern medium's cabinet. So this guy Eisley is also an enthusiast of the occult and of Native American folklore, as far as it goes. And so he's also interested in reptiles, amphibians, but also interested in this shaking tent rite. Now we're going to see more about that soon. So now in this club, they're talking about these tents and whatever, because remember, this is like an in real life Discord server. You have your bedroom, you got your meeting room, you got all these people coming together to talk. I guess like modern day Discord servers, some other stuff happens here, but I don't know. Anyways, they're talking about Native American belief and the shaking tent ritual. The special tent with its entranced occupant is no different from the cabinet, I contended. So he's talking to some dudes there. The only difference is the type of voices that emerge. Many of the physical phenomena are identical. The movement of powerful forces shaking the conical hut, objects thrown, some poltergeist shit going on in here. All this is familiar to Western psychical science. Another sus point for Loren Eiseley for considering psychic stuff science. I would not debunk it outright, but I would consider it as a modern form of folklore. But anyways, who am I to say? I'm just a weird Turkish YouTuber. What is different are the voices projected. Here they are, the cries of animals, the voices from the swamp and the mountain, the solitary elementals before whom the primitive man stands in awe, and from whom he begs sustenance. Here the game lords reign supreme. Man himself is voiceless. Game lords are these like spirits that kind of guide animals in this folk Native American lore. They're not people who are deeply into gaming. But let's also take another side quest and look at this shaking tent rite. So this, to as far as I could tell, is this Native American ritual. I'm at a loss to understand which tribes did it and how. Probably some people on the East Coast. And they basically built these little tent-like things and had a kind of shamanic trance in there and claimed to hear voices, or maybe make voices. And here's a very nice vintage illustration of such a tent. You can see in the sky all these like spirits are entering or issuing from the hut. There's a bear, wombat thing with a long tongue. There's a coyote. It's a floating witch lady, a turtle, moon, floating demon guy. I just love this drawing. A burb and a snake and a UFO. Just marvelous. Anyways. A low, halting query reached me from the back of the room. So this guy, Eisley, was talking about the shaking tent rite and how similar it is to poltergeists and shit. And then Dreer chips in. I was startled even in the midst of my discussion. Yeah, why write like this? Why write like this? Like, let me put on my writing hat for a second. A low, halting query reached me from the back of the room. I would just say, instead of this whole sentence, Dreer spoke out from the back of the room. That's that. And anyways, going back to the story, let's not kill the vibe here. I'm gonna keep Loren Eiseley's words exactly. There will be sections in which I skip over some paragraphs, and there's gonna be one slide which I used ChatGPT to summarize because it's just two OTOs and long. But anyways, I was startled even in the midst of my discussion to note that it was Dreer. He's chuckling. And the game lords, what are they? Oh, yeah. He's just he's just kind of like discombobulated. He's dissociating. Each species of animal is supposed to have gigantic leaders of more than normal size, I explained. Yes, if you say gigantic, you don't need to say more than normal size, for fuck's sake. Anyways, these beings are the immaterial controllers of that particular type of animal. Legend about them is confused. Sometimes they partake of human qualities, will and intelligence, but they are of animal shape. They control the movements of game, that is to say hunting animals, not games in your computer. And thus, their favor may mean life or death to man. Well, because people depended on hunting for survival. But once again, he retorts, but Dreer is not fazed. Are they visible? Again, Dreer's low, troubled voice came from the back of the room. Oh my god. Native belief has it that they can be seen on rare occasions, I answered. In a sense, they remind one of the concept of the archetypes, the originals behind the petty show of our small, transitory existence. They are the immortal renewers of substance, the force behind and above animate nature. Well, this guy is like kind of trying to respond to this older guy, but Dreer is like, obviously he's been through a lot, he's seen a lot, so he's like, sport, freaking weakling. But also like, goddamn, maybe this was kind of new at the time this story was recorded, let's say. But if I get a penny each time someone spoke about archetypes and shit, I just find it really boring and even banal and kind of dumb in the present day and age. But okay, anyways. But Dreer, once again, he's like Teflon, nothing sticks. Archetypes. Fucking archetypes. Do they dance? Persisted Dreer. Also, I need to like chip in again and just show you this like bright red flag mark of bad writing, okay? When you're talking about characters speaking, imagine I'm talking to somebody. They tell me, I got sugar for sale, said the man. How much is the sugar cost, said Daddy Cosman. Oh, for you, a pretty penny, said the man. Like when you're talking about dialogues, just fucking use the word said. You don't need to like said. You don't need to use these fancy replacement words like persisted or retorted or I don't know. Like go with said. If you're talking about dialogue, repeat the word said, S-A-I-D, over and over, and don't make this mistake that Loren Eiseley did. Anyways, now he's getting just too frustrated at this guy. At this, I grew nettled. All Dreer in a heckling mood was something new. I cannot answer the question, I said acidly. Acidly? That's an adjective and this guy chose to use it. Fuck. My informants failed to elaborate upon it. Who are your informants? They're probably the Native Americans whose stories you're pillaging. I really don't like this guy, I'm sorry. Anyways, my informants failed to elaborate upon it. But they believe implicitly in these monstrous beings, told to and propitiate them. It is their voices that emerge from the shaking tent. Going back at this shaking tent ceremony, but yet this whole attitude, I have to like, I knew I promised you a straightforward story reading, but I can't help but get angry at this. My informants, they believe implicitly. Yeah, why don't you let them join your fucking club instead? Okay, going on. Then like I kind of like skip over some chapters here. There is a link to this whole story in the video description and in the pinned comment, so go read the whole thing if you wanna, but I'm just gonna skip over certain sections. The evening passed. Men drifted homeward or went into their rooms. Lucky bastards having rooms to stay in this community club where they discuss legends and frogs and shit. What a lucky generation, these boomers. Anyways, I had been a year in the woods and hungered for voices and companionship. So he was living in the forest, jacking off and hunting. Okay. Finally, however, I sat alone with my glass, a little mellow, perhaps. Oh God, this writing. Enjoying the warmth of the fire and remembering the blue snowfields of the north as they should be remembered, in the comfort of warm rooms. I'm just like putting my thumb into my mouth. This sort of writing, I'm sorry, like Loren Eiseley, no matter how many honorary doctorates he won from like whatever community college or whatever, like this attitude. Anyways, he's being mellow, remembering his 1 year spent in the blue snowfields of the north with blue balls, I guess, too. Anyways, I think an hour must have passed. The club was silent except for the ticking of an antiquated clock on the mantel and small night noises from the street. What are small night noises? Have you heard? I mean, I was staying over with a few friends some time ago and I heard some small night noises. If I reproduce them on YouTube, I think this video will be delisted. Fucking God. Anyways, I must have drowsed. Yeah. Because you're too cool to say I fell asleep, right? You must have drowsed. Because you're God's special boy. What the... At all events, it was some time before I grew aware that a chair had been drawn up opposite of me. I started. Oh, it was drowsing. Ay. Anyways, now for this part of the story, there's like entire chapters here, which I shamelessly fed into ChatGPT and said, give me a summary, less than 100 words. It was a cold and humid night. Dreer cryptically hinted at supernatural beings liking such weather, attributing it to the spring influence. So Dreer was like a dick to this guy, but now he's like drawn up a chair next to him and said, there is something to your spirits, maybe. His unexpected vulnerability surfaced, apologizing for his prior insensitivity. And then Loren Eiseley wanted to shift the topic to frogs, but he was still ambiguous and he was still hung up on his previous experiments with axolotls and stuff. And he had like a dark, haunted demeanor, hinting at profound experiences with primitive religions, challenging my disbelief. This might be the only author who is improved by AI shit, because AI is shit, but this guy is such a special blend of self-important shit that actually AI renders him legible and clear. I did not want to get this acid. I'm really sorry, everybody. But yeah, we are talking about cryptids, not about this guy's insufferable writing. But really, if you are writing, like, go look up at least a few stories by Loren Eiseley. He will show you what not to do on every case. Acknowledging his expertise, I humbly requested enlightenment, erasing age barriers. In that moment, Dreer and Loren Eiseley became friends, and they kind of like broke the ice, and they say, okay, here we are under the solitary lamp, facing an unknown and uncaring cosmos. They kind of made peace and started talking about cosmic uncertainty and shit. And then Dreer kind of apologizes, says it could happen to anyone, and especially in the spring. So he's now kind of like in PTSD mode. Obviously this Dreer guy had like some weird experiences, maybe with the same sort of supernatural beings that Loren Eiseley was hinting at with the shaking tent ceremony. This thing. Okay, what can I say? It could happen to anyone, said Dreer, and especially in the spring. Remember that. And all I did was to skip just a few feet, mark you, but I skipped. Remember that too. You wouldn't remember the place at all. At least not as it was then. He paused and shook the ice in his glass. Because these are gentlemen. Of course they have to be drinking whiskey. Nothing less for these goddamn... Yeah. Anyways. And he spoke more easily. It was a road that came out finally. Even the cat doesn't like this shit writing. Yeah, I hate it too. God damn. It was a road that came out finally in a marsh along the Schuylkill River. Probably all industrial now, but I had a little house out there with a laboratory thrown in. It was convenient to the marsh and helped me with my studies of amphibia. Moreover, it was wild. It was a wild, lonely road, and I wanted solitude. It is always the demand of the naturalist, you understand that, says Dreer, the grizzled old eccentric. Anyways, he goes back to his memories and recollections. Oh, like tinkling his freaking whiskey eyes. My best work was behind me. He held up his black gloved right hand and glanced at it meditatively. He saw one of his hands is in a glove. Oh, I wonder why. The work on the axolotl, the newt neoteny. I worked hard. Must have taken years for this goddamn idiot to figure out how to mix iodine with the tadpoles, where people were publishing about it. We just saw these things. I mean, this is not rocket science. You know, people are doing these experiments in labs. They're doing them on Reddit. So this is not Dreer's pioneering work. Like, whatever this story is it like a garbled memory, some embellished memory? We don't know, but we are getting there. So he's looking at his black Darth Vader hand and says, things I want to forget. There are times when I worked all night. I don't know, what did he forget? What did he want to forget? You're in this cabin working with frogs. I don't know, like dripping iodine up their butts or some shit. I don't know what you wanted to forget. Anyways. Or I diverted myself while waiting the result of an experiment by midnight walks. What is the experiment doing? Like, are you rendering some shit there? Are you boiling some, I don't know. Are you like breaking open smoke detectors and getting the radioactive elements? I don't know. It was a strange road. Wild all night, but paved and close enough to the city that there were occasional street lamps, all uphill and downhill with bits of forest leaning in over it, till you walked in a tunnel of trees. Then suddenly you were in the marsh, and the road ended at an old unused wharf. It's really like, this is the most American thing ever. Guy is having a sort of mystical, scientific, religious, maybe spiritual experience. Maybe something even demonic, as we're about to see. But even the most isolated place these people can think about have roads, street lamps, wharfs, and pavement. This is so American. Like, nowhere else in the world people think about roads and street lamps when they're thinking about a totally uninhabited place. It's just strange. By the way, looking at this reference of the black gloved hand, I could not help but think of this one X-Files episode called Young at Heart. So in this episode, there's also a researcher and he's doing experiments with frogs and salamanders. And actually, if you cut off the arm of a salamander, it can grow back again. So in the X-Files episode, something like this also happens, but they make it with a human. So it's kind of hinted that maybe this guy may even have grafted amphibian tissue into his hand. I don't know what he's doing. He's like cut his dick off and like replace it with a frog's leg. I don't know. But just reminded me of this. And if you have been watching this far, please let me know. Please comment in the comment section. I like the X-Files, Daddy Kozman. So I know you've been watching this far. So anyways, moving on. Anyways, the Dreer guy just is going all emo about his abandoned walks in the forest. He says, I forget, you are not there. So how could I expect you to feel or know about this skipping? Look at me now. A sober man, eh? And then Loren Eiseley is like, yeah, dignified, I said cautiously. Very well, but young man, there is a time to skip. On country roads in the spring, it is not necessary that there be girls. You will skip without them. You will skip because something within you knows the time. Frog time. Then you will skip. This is very weird. I threw out entire sections, chunks of this exaggerated OTO story. But even in them, there's no context. The guy just like throws it out there. There's this like reference about skipping, which I think Loren Eiseley thought was like deep and like edgy and mysterious. So like, even without girls, you must be skipping. I don't know, like, you go out, you take a girl out on a walk to a lonely Pennsylvania wharf and you skip with them. Well, what's the deal here? What's the angle here? Like, is there something I don't get because maybe I'm not from there, but I don't think there is. Anyways, so this Dreer guy is all like weird about skipping even without girls. I don't know. Is that what you call it over there? Seriously. For fuck's sake. Anyways, then Loren Eiseley is like clearly under the spell of this older guy, this kind of like dark, Palpatinic figure. Yes, then I will skip, I repeated, hypnotized. Mad or not, there was a force in Albert Dreer. Even there, under the club lights, the night damp of an unused road began to gather. So he's like so charismatic, he's like taking the guy there with the force of his persuasion alone. Words have power. Anyways, the Dreer goes on. They come out. Then, he said more calmly, all amphibia have to return to the water for mating and egg laying. Not all. I mean, if you want to be actually pedantic, there are frogs that can mate and lay eggs on moist earth. But anyways, let's not be that guy. Even toads will hop miles across country to streams and waterways. You don't see them unless you go out at night in the right places, as I did. But that night, something happened. He goes to all the right places, which is just like a lake with a wharf, which is like the most normal place out there. Anyways, well, it was unusual, put it that way, as an understatement. It was late, and the creatures seemed to know it. It's a very relative statement, but okay. You could feel the forces of mighty and archaic life welling up from the very ground. The water was pulling them. Not water as we know it, but calm. I just had to say that. Like, not water as we know it. What kind of writing is this? I'm beginning to suspect this is a pure fiction story, but yeah, let's not make any assumptions, huh? Because we are here researching the frog game lord of Pennsylvania on a serious quest to learn about cryptids and shit. Anyways, not water as we know it, but the mother, the ancient life force, the thing that made us in the days of creation and that lurks around us still, unnoticed in our sterile cities. My brother in Christ, you are in a sterile suburb yourself. Goddamn. Anyways, I was no different from any other fool coming home on a spring night, except that as a student of life, and of amphibia in particular, I was, shall we say, more aware of the creatures. You see, I had performed experiments. The black glove gestured before my eyes. He jacked the frog off. I was, as I proved, suspectable. It began on that lost stretch of roadway leading to the river. If there's a roadway, it's not lost. People build it and maintain it, for fuck's sake. Anyways, and it began simply enough. Let's do some like incredible high-tech Foley effects now. Something is going on. All around, under the street lamps, I saw little frogs and big frogs hopping steadily towards the river. They were going in my direction. At that time, I had my whimsies, and I was spry enough to feel the tug, oh God, of the great movement. I joined them. There was no mystery about it. I simply began to skip, and to skip gaily, to enjoy the great bobbing shadow I created as I passed onward with that leaping host, all headed for the river. So all the frogs started appearing. Big frogs, medium frogs, little frogs, funk girls, chunk girls, na 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 girls, na na. Anyways, they're all skipping. Now, skipping along a wet pavement in spring is infectious. Particularly, well, I don't know that. I really can't see the appeal. Like, if I see a lot of frogs, it would be exciting, but I wouldn't want to skip because I'd be scared I would step over them. I would step on them. God damn. So anyways, he's skipping because, okay, he's leaping like a frog. That's the impulse. The impulse to take mightier leaps, to soar further, increases progressively. The madness worked into me. I bounded till my lungs labored, and my shadow, at first my own shadow, bounded and labored with me. Yes. Yeah, I know it's a shit story too. I'm sorry. I hope you can hear the cat screaming. It was only midway in my flight that I began to grow conscious that I was not alone. So something weird is going on. The feeling was not strong at first. Normally a sober pedestrian. I know. I was ecstatically preoccupied with the discovery of latent stores of energy and agility which I had not suspected in my subdued existence. This kind of writing, I don't know, it is making me discover latent stores of rage and hatred, which I did not know I had as a person who could read and write. This kind of writing just fucking sucks, I'm sorry. I mean, it's interesting enough to... Well, it is interesting, but it's bad. It's bad, man. So bad. So fucked up now. It was only as we passed under a street lamp that I noticed, beside my own bobbing shadow, another great leaping grotesquerie that had an uncanny suggestion of the frog world about it. The shocking aspect of the thing lay in its size, and the fact that, judging from the shadow, it was soaring higher and more gaily than myself. So Dreer saw the shadow of a frog-like humanoid figure jumping around. Very well, you will say. And here Dreer paused and looked at me tolerantly. Does anyone ever look at you tolerantly? What kind of a description? Anyways, why don't you turn around? Loren Eiseley says to Dreer. That would be the scientific thing to do, cause you're looking at a dangerous weird shadow of something weird. You might want to turn around and check that shit out, but no. It would be the scientific thing to do, young man. But let me tell you, it's not done. Not on an empty road at midnight. Not when the shadow is already beside your shadow, and then it's joined by another, and another, and another, and another. I was not, I suppose, a particularly religious man, and the cries merely revealed the extremity of my terror. Nevertheless, this is a strange thing, and whether it involves the crossed beam or to appeal to a Christian deity, I will not attempt to answer. This is also another fucking bullshit thing that especially boomers said about themselves. They could write about the most weird supernatural horror, frog demons or frog game lords or some shit, but they're never seen as religious because not like that. Not religious. Oh no, these are the zealots. The zealots, the backwoods people, the flyover people, the hillbillies. I'm not religious myself either, but this sort of semi-educated people's hatred of just simple plain old religion. It's just, there's something as disgusting in it as true to the bone fundamentalism itself. There's just something very icky about it. And I'm just sorry, this is a side tangent, but anyways. This is not to condone religious extremism, but here, I think Dreer could have said something like, I began to pray despite of my scientific upbringing or something, But no, it's a strange thing. Appeal to a Christian deity. He will not even attempt to answer. No. In one electric however, I was free, so he probably said Hail Mary or some shit, and then he was free. It was like the release from demoniac possession. One moment I was leaping in an inhuman company of elder things, and the next moment I was a badly shaken human being on a wharf. Strangest of all, perhaps, was the sudden silence of that midnight hour. I looked down in the circle of the arc light. This is like as industrial and suburban as it gets, arc lights and shit, and my man is still feeling supernatural. And there by my feet hopped feebly some tiny froglets of the Great Migration. There was nothing impressive about them, but you will understand that I drew back in revulsion. I have never been able to handle them for research since. My work is in the past. So, that's that for this story. So this Dreer guy apparently confronted the Frog Lord of Pennsylvania, which may or may not have been related to these Indian tent shaking ceremonies and these like game lords. And it left such a trauma on him that he never injected an axolotl with iodine ever after. But this story is like awfully written. Okay, I guess we've established that. But also it appears in this guy's biography. So something about it must be true, I get. What could it be? Let's put our thinking caps on. Maybe it was a bona fide encounter with an entity which the Native Americans also worshipped as a deity. And yes, true, there are many frog-related artifacts from the hundreds of First Nations that inhabit the American continent. But you have to realize not all these cultures are the one and the same. Some of these artifacts are actually quite old. They come from Mesoamerica, not Pennsylvania, that I could say. There's also lots of Native American folklore. Now this is actually like a much better story than the abomination we just read. There's a really nice ebook called When Frog Stole the Waters, Frog Symbolism in Native American Folklore by Dr. John Anderson. And I mean, just it's got a lot of tales and stuff. So this is actually in the video description and in the pinned comment, so go check that out. And all I'm getting is there are lots of frog stories in North America, especially around the eastern seaboard. There's one about one frog blocking the seas and blocking waterways and like becoming dangerous. So this sort of thing is not without precedent. So maybe it was an encounter with this thing, or maybe it was a giant form of local frog. Certainly the contemporary folklore of the United States is full of these frog cryptids. And there's one called the Loveland frog, which was reported from a, I think, similar area, or maybe not, but from the same country nevertheless. So maybe something like this, I don't know. But if you want to learn more about frog cryptids, please listen to my 2-part frog cryptid extravaganza. Just go subscribe to this channel, click the bell icon and look in my previous videos. You will be able to see. You'll see. Or maybe it was a hallucination. Maybe this Dreer guy was just a junkie. Maybe he had a sort of PTSD or schizophrenia from some other lifetime trauma. Or maybe he was just built that way. He just liked to bullshit. If you ever know any like real pathological liars in life, you'll also notice that they're extremely charismatic as well. So maybe he was that sort of a guy. Or maybe he was just licking frogs and getting high. Who knows? But the short of the long story is, unfortunately, shocker, right? This is a work of fiction. This is not a cryptid per se. It's just perhaps the best thing that this guy has ever written, and that's saying something. I'm really sorry, I don't want to dunk on this guy, but the sort of conceit, self-aggrandizement, and just sort of this sort of white boomer arrogance really reeks throughout Loren Eiseley's writing, and it's just not really great. But at least the dance of the frogs was sorta interesting, I guess. But still, perhaps there is a weird zone between legends, true stories, and outright lies. And this is how folklore is born and how it evolves. And in the words of one of my favorite YouTubers, Dr. Justin Sedge of the Esoterica channel, to freeze down mythology is to kill it. So obviously there is no Pennsylvania frog lore cryptid, but there are lots of frog cryptids from the United States. There are lots of giant frogs, and there are lots of weird natural phenomena too that we can't really explain. Stuff like animal falls, frog falls, and you mix them all together, and even despite Loren Eiseley's awful, atrocious writing, you do get some interesting stories, and you do get perhaps these things are to folklore and myths and future religion even what proteins are to a genome. So these are the building blocks of a deeper lore waiting to come to life in the far future. So even with all these misgivings, at least it was fun to narrate and kind of like shit talk. Even with all these misgivings, the Frog Lord of Pennsylvania cryptid story has some nice things about it, and I hope you enjoyed my retelling of this story. If you know any strange stories from Pennsylvania or about frogs or from your part of the world, please share them on the comments. And if you watched this far, please comment on the comment section. I have seen the Frog Lord's Daddy Kozman, so I know you've been watching. Thanks for watching, and if you want to download this PDF, please subscribe to me on patreon.com or donate to me on Buy Me a Coffee. And as always, have a nice day. This was the Frog Lord Extravaganza by C.M. Kozman. Have a great time, everybody. Good night.